Greetings from IIT Madras Heritage Center. Today at the center we are in conversation with Professor Vedantam Murali Krishna Shastri, known as Professor V.M.K. Shastri, who was here in IIT Madras as a faculty member from 1970 to 1998. I'll give a brief introduction and then we will have a conversation about the history of IIT Madras as Professor Shastri looks at it during his tenure in this institute. Professor V.M.K. Shastri graduated from the first IIT, which is at Kharagpur. Then he did his masters in Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. Then his PhD from University of Illinois at Chicago Circle campus, Chicago, in the area of heat transfer. He worked with Professor James Hartnett, highly reputed heat transfer researchers of those times. He worked in IIT Kanpur for some time. He joined IIT Madras in 1970 in the Department of Mechanical Engineering. Particularly, he was associated with the Heat Transfer and Thermal Power Laboratory. He went on to become head of the Department of Mechanical Engineering from 1986 to 1990. Later, he was the Dean of Academic Research and he was the member of Board of Governors when he retired in 1998. He also is the founder professor of ETC, that is the Educational Technology Center, which is now a very big part of the IIT Madras outreach, especially through the NPTEL program. He was chairman of the Vanavani committee and also he was warden of Kaveri Hostel. So Professor Shastri has tremendous, a long and vast experience in the IIT system, first as a student, undergraduate student in IIT Kharagpur, and then ending up as the member of the board of governors at IIT Madras. So he has seen the IIT system grow from its initial, almost the beginning of the 1950s up to 98, but then even now, although he is officially outside the IIT system for the last 20 years, he has been a very keen observer, external observer of the growth of the IIT system, IIT Madras. So it is our pleasure to have Professor Shastri today to get his perspective of the IIT Madras and IIT system in general. Welcome, Professor Shastri. We are very happy that you are here.
Thank you, Professor.
Today. I would like to start by asking you what were the circumstances under which you came to IIT Madras from United States. Especially you joined the Heat Transfer and Thermal Power Lab, the academic and research environment, especially also with respect to heat transfer subject. Kindly say a few words about it.
First of all, after graduating from IISc Bangalore, that is my masters, I was quite deeply influenced by Dr. Ramchandran, because though I was doing my master's degree in foundry engineering, he was actually handling the subject of heat transfer to us. So I did his project work under him. And then I worked in the industry for a year, but then I wanted to shift it to teaching line. So I thought teaching line, if I want to really contribute, I must have a PhD. So I was in search of a guide for PhD. And in that process, I went first of all to IIT Kharagpur as a lecturer. So I was not very successful in finding a PhD guide. So I shifted to IIT Kanpur. So there, one Professor Richard Zimmerman from Ohio State University, he actually accepted me to work under him. But because of some policy issues involving both Indian side as well as American side, unlike Germany, the assistance from United States was basically a private affair, not from the government. It is what is called an IIT, the university consortium of about 9 universities joining together. And because of that, there was policy differences, and the American side objected that until the entire BTech program is in place, you cannot have even faculty members working part-time for PhD.
This was in the early 1960s.
This was in 1962. So after a year, the American professor said, Shastri, if you want to really get a PhD, go abroad. That is how I ended up in the United States. So after my PhD, I joined the faculty of the University of Illinois also. And when I was there working, 1969, I got a letter from Professor Ramchandran, who was already by that time the director of IIT Madras. So he said, why don't you come and join the mechanical engineering department? So I said, yes, I can do, but I have now working on an NASA project, so 1 more year I need. So can I have a joining time of 1 year? With his, very broad-minded outlook, he said, why not? So that is how basically in those days, the people who went abroad, they were not willing to settle down there. They just wanted to improve their qualifications and then get back. That means basically Bharat Mata calling back. So that is how the situation was, and I returned. So I was supposed to come and join the 70 academic session July, but then my professor and guide, Dr. Hartnett, he said that now you are going to India and we don't really see, he was actually the very prominent International Journal of Heat and Mass Transfer, that is the international journal, he was the editor. So he said, we are not really receiving many articles, research articles in the area of heat transfer from India. So for you to really work in this area, it may be a good idea if you meet several of the international experts in heat transfer. So they said, that's why in August of 1970, there was a Paris 4th International Heat Transfer Conference. So he said, I will introduce you to a lot of people there. Why don't you come? And because our paper also was there. So present it and then go. So I requested Dr. Ramchandran, is it okay if I join instead of the beginning of the academic year? In the middle of the year, if I join, is it okay? He jumped at the opportunity and he really, that shows actually the vision of Dr. Ramchandran.
And he himself was a heat transfer
He was
person,
himself
basically.
a heat transfer person. So he said, that's a very good idea. You come and join after attending those things. So I came here, and because it was in the middle of the academic session, I had not much teaching work to do. So in fact, it was a tremendous experience for me to interact with him, because on the first day when I met him in his office, he said, Shastri, this lab used to be called a steam lab. So after I came here, I changed the name to Heat Transfer and Thermal Power.
This is very important from the history of the heat transfer research in the country and in IIT Madras. It was called a steam power lab, under Professor Narias. But Professor Ramchandran, because he was a heat transfer person, he said we should have a heat transfer specialization. So he changed the name. Professor Narias was the head, and then 70 Professor Shastri came.
When had the lab been set up? So how many years had it been running?
It was set up in the beginning itself. In fact, there was one professor from the University of Stuttgart, Professor Quach.
Yeah.
He was also a member of the German committee which established IIT. So he actually was working in Stuttgart. It was basically a steam lab,
It was a replica of
that.
the Stuttgart lab?
Yes. So I came, and then Dr. Ramchandran said, though I changed the name, whatever facilities you want, we will try to provide. Can you at least after 4 or 5 years make this heat transfer lab a real good heat transfer lab which is really doing reasonably good work in the area?
So excuse me, was heat transfer being taught as a subject in any IIT or other institutions in the country at that time?
To my knowledge, there was heat transfer was not being taught at all in any institution. Maybe, I may be wrong, maybe Professor Sukhatme in IIT Bombay might have started, but I doubt it, because as undergraduate curriculum, it was not part of that. So in fact, that is one of the reasons why Dr. Ramchandran particularly said, first of all, let us develop a master's degree program in heat transfer. So now that you don't have any teaching load, why don't you design a 2-year program, MTech program, in the area, in the subject of heat transfer? So I worked on it for a couple of months. So I made a detailed program. The curriculum was completely finalized. Then Dr. Ramchandran looked at it. He approved, and he said that until that time, the master's degree program in mechanical engineering was only involving, I think, 2 or 3 areas. One is advanced thermal power, machine design, and probably manufacturing. I am not very sure. So he said, let us have a regular program. And then when he was quite certain that there should be a 2-year program, master's degree program in several areas, he asked the Department of Mechanical Engineering staff. There are almost about 10 labs in the mechanical engineering. So he said each lab, each special area, you should have a similar program. So that's why by 1971, all the labs of mechanical engineering department, each department, for example, the MTech program in combustion, MTech program in refrigeration and air conditioning, like that, all these 10 programs actually were developed, and that's how it started in 1971. But more importantly, what Dr. Ramchandran suggested is that heat transfer is an engineering science. It was neither engineering nor science. It used to be taught in chemical engineering also as more of as a practical thing rather than providing theoretical basis for it. So Dr. Ramchandran suggested that we should also see that institutions like Guindy Engineering College and other engineering colleges in the country, they also adopt this particular thing. So I called actually, I arranged a summer program for 4 weeks for teachers in the particular thermal area. So 50 institutions actually participated for this. So for that, what we did was we actually had this 4-week summer program for these teachers. Along with that, we also tried to help them by developing a lab manual. For example, how many experiments you can conduct in heat transfer lab. And that was quite a success because for the next 4 or 5 years, because in most of these colleges, they have to go through a long drawn out procedure to have any syllabus changes occurring, because there should be a university level and all that. So that is the reason why it took some time, but eventually a large number of institutions in the country started teaching heat transfer as a subject in the undergraduate program.
I remember this very well, sir, because I joined in 71 with you, and I was the part of that first MTech course, specialization. So the point here is that the heat transfer for teaching undergraduate students and bringing that into the master's program actually was done by IIT Madras. With the encouragement of Professor Ramchandran, and Professor Shastri was there, and Professor M.E. Krishnamurthy was in the refrigeration lab. That's how heat transfer took roots. Probably Professor Sukhatme, who was a student of Professor Rosino, and then he's a heat transfer man, he had also was. Sir, how about Professor A.K. Mohanty? Did he participate in this thing from IIT Kharagpur?
At that time he did not, but basically what Mohanty was doing was, he was in the, of course, mechanical engineering department in IIT Kharagpur. But when to actually go ahead with this 1971, when we had this, Dr. Ramchandran, he is, in fact, I greatly respect him because he had tremendous vision of so many things. One thing is this introduction of heat transfer as a basic core course in the undergraduate program all across the country. That is number one. Number two, he said that how about research? And I am really quite surprised that he called me and he said, now we will take admission for PhD students, so take some. Then Dr. Kolar was one of the first ones. So there are 3 students. In 1972, again there was a batch of students and I took 3 students already under me. And I was thinking that, it's too much for me because he comes and says, take 2 more. Take 2 more. He said that is because, my problem was I worked actually for my PhD program in a space research, space heat transfer. In India, we were very much on the ground,
Yes.
nowhere near space.
That's right.
So therefore, what happened was that I myself was not really experienced in several areas of applications of the theory of heat transfer. So he said, take 2 more. His idea was, if I take 5 students in 5 different aspects of heat transfer, some initiation of research can take place. That later on I found out the wisdom in that, because I think we have tried to develop a heat transfer lab very nicely because of his guidance.
So did Professor Ramachandran also initiate these outreach programs that you mentioned, the teacher training programs that you conducted in summer, in other branches, in other labs and so on?
Actually, this summer program that I conducted was not initiated by him. It was the so-called Ministry of HRD, the
Ministry of
so-called
Education.
Quality improvement program. They wanted to actually have this because this is for the teachers, for the quality improvement. So that is how it actually started. But then his vision was how to make this particular subject a very important and prominent one in the country, because it actually, heat transfer is a subject that cuts across several disciplines. In aerospace it is there, in chemical engineering it is there, in of course mechanical engineering obviously. So because of that he wanted to, that it should develop actually quite well all across. And so he wanted to say, why don't we have because you have now international contacts, why don't you invite these people from abroad and then we will have an international conference. But then finally we decided, first of all, let us find out what is the extent of research that is being done in the country before we take this international step. So we wanted to have the first National Heat Transfer Conference in 1972. And he wanted us to organize this one, and Dr. Krishnamurthy and myself, we were the organizing secretaries.
Yes, sir.
And we started.
Dr. M.V. Krishnamurthy.
M.A. Krishnamurthy. So it was in during the Bangladesh War, 1971, December 1st to 3rd in CLT, and big names, Professor Hartnett, Professor Zarij, Professor Spalding from UK, Professor Kadambi from IIT Kanpur, Khabakar Shava from Russia. For us, we had just then joined for research. It was a big thing that we had not heard of heat transfer as a topic. I am dwelling a little bit on this because we started heat transfer research, not only teaching but research. This conference brought together all the research community. So, and I am very happy to tell you it's running very successfully. The next one is being held in the December of every 2 years it changes. So, Professor Ramachandran's vision and the hard work that you and others, Professor M.V. Krishnamurthy and others put in has really fructified.
In fact, 1972 when we had, 71 we had this conference, and 73 we had the second conference in IIT Kanpur. And then Dr. Ramachandran said, now look, it looks like we have a reasonably good work that is being done both in the research laboratories, educational institutions, and as well as industry to some extent. So why don't we have a society?
Yes.
So he said that we'll form an Indian heat transfer society. So he gave me the task of memorandum of association,
throwing the constitution for
and all that. So we worked on it, and then in 1974 we established the Indian Society for Heat and Mass Transfer.
Yes.
Heat and Mass Transfer.
With our heat transfer lab as the headquarters.
As the headquarters.
Even today it is so, sir.
Yeah, actually 1974 onwards until 1991, I had the responsibility of being the secretary. So for 17 years, because there was nobody else that was willing to take.
You would have been the founder secretary.
Founder secretary.
That's right.
So how about that regional center? This is also connected with heat transfer
Yes.
and energy actually.
See, by that time, Dr. Ramchandran left actually in 1973 to take over as Secretary, Department of Science and Technology. In fact, that's what another thing that I aspect of Dr. Ramchandran. He is an institution builder. He went and established the DST, Department of Science and Technology.
Yes.
And afterwards, of course, from there he shifted to United Nations and he established the United Nations Center for Human Settlements.
In Nairobi.
Yes.
In Nairobi.
Yes.
So in that sense, he is actually a creator of institutions because of his visionary outlook. So after he went to DST, there was actually an international center for heat and mass transfer in Yugoslavia that was established with the assistance of UNESCO. So several of my international colleagues in the area, they were associated with that center. They said now that because these people have attended the conferences in 1971, 73 and 75 in IIT Bombay, they saw the kind of work that is being done. So what they said is, why don't we have not only India, but in the entire Asian region, we will do it. So the UNESCO actually sent a delegation to two various countries, of which actually Dr. Ramchandran was a part of that delegation. And then the Yugoslavian Center's Secretary General was another member. And of course my former advisor in Chicago, he was also another member. They toured these countries and then they said, yeah, it is time for us to have actually a center for Asian countries, Asia and Pacific countries.
Yeah. Yes.
Again, Dr. Ramchandran had the responsibility, and by that time he was already in the DST, very busy and all that. So he asked me to create that center. So I again drafted the constitution and also had several representatives from Bangladesh and Indonesia and other places. So we formed the executive committee and the board of directors from Japan, for example. So we created that center, and then Dr. Ramchandran said, why don't we start actually publishing a journal, taking into consideration the articles from these things. So I also became the first editor of the journal. He is the editor, but of course I was the scientific secretary of that, that center. He said, once we start this one, we have to do it immediately. He's quite impatient about getting things done. So first journal should come out by December of 1978. So we started this regional center in 1977, constitutionally approved. So the first journal should come actually in 78 December. So we got it, but in those days, as you know very well, the printing and all that is, the words should be arranged in the
Manual typesetting. That's right.
Oh, in the first heat transfer conference, we were all research scholars. Every day I used to go to the printing press for a proofreading. We looked at the equations and said, what are all these equations? We don't understand whatever. Yeah. All the research scholars, we had a fantastic experience of those times.
And the printing press was actually in the old shopping center.
Yes.
In our campus.
Yeah. So this is very nice to hear from you directly. The
I have one.
yeah, please go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
Now you said that Professor Ramchandran was interested in starting heat transfer. Has it anything to do with his being chairman of the Research Council of Defence Laboratory? You know, he was chairman of the Research Council of DMR. In fact, again I want to ask you, 72 I think, the director of PRDL, Narayanan, came with a delegation and they wanted the IIT to submit projects. Yes. In fact, most of the projects were submitted from the aeronautics department. Maybe I had also submitted a project. Now, why I am telling you is there was something about, they were thinking of rocket cones, and then it was getting, could not be used again because of ablation. So he said that something had to be done. So I had proposed something. So about a coating of ceramic and a ceramic metal and a metal. I said the most important thing is you have to make heat transfer measurements. And you should have a plasma torch to do this. In fact, my project was submitted, but it was not funded. But I came to know much later that the plasma torch was purchased by the Defense Laboratory. But what I am telling you, did Ramchandran get interested in heat transfer because of its application in
First of all, Dr. Ramchandran himself was actually, he had his PhD from Purdue University. So in the subject of heat transfer, that's number one. And of course, he was, head of the department in AAC Bangalore. But more importantly, he wanted, in fact, now that you mentioned about the sponsored research and industrial collaboration, in 1972-73 area, again Dr. Ramchandran said, somehow, when we do something, we should also interact with the industry. Industry institute interaction must be there. There used to be what is called RDOEI, Research and Development Organization for Electrical Industry, in the Ministry of Heavy Industry in center, at the center. So a request came from there saying that our motors and all these things are becoming actually very large in size. Electrically we can do all these things, but because of the cooling problem, we are not able to reduce the size for the same capacity. So can you please do something, because they know that Dr. Ramchandran was an expert in heat transfer and he was director here. So they contacted him. Then he asked me and Dr. Krishnamurthy to look into this. So Dr. Krishnamurthy, by that time, he changed his interest into refrigeration conditioning. So we went to Bhopal, and as usual, they were all buying the drawings and equipment and everything from Associated Electrical Industries, which was supplying the equipment to that technique. And they were not really interested in collaborating. But luckily, because of Dr. Ramchandran's personal connection, Dr. V. Krishnamurthy, at that time was
BHEL top man.
Was the top man. He said, let them come and look at it. But even though the faculty, the staff there were not very cooperative, there was one Mr. Walker, a 75-year-old man coming from AEI. He himself said it's a good idea because we don't understand what is happening there. So theory must be also matched with our experimental work. So let them do this. And because of Dr. Krishnamurthy's help, they supplied to us all the drawings and other things like that. Then we started. In fact, that RDOEA industry project in 1972, they gave us about 1.5 lakhs or so.
That is a large amount at that time.
Probably the first major sponsored research project that came to us, to IIT.
Nice.
Earlier there might be some, as far as my knowledge goes, that is the first major that is because of the fact that there were administrative difficulties later on regarding how to distribute the money and all that kind of thing, and that is the reason why they said we have to make some policy and there are certain rules. That is the reason why I am assuming that is the first sponsored research project that came from outside. So for 3 years that I was associated with Dr. Ramchandran, 1978 to 73, he started in several different fronts. For example, he also started some interdisciplinary programs, but because he is way ahead of his times, they didn't really take off.
It took 45 years for that to really materialize.
Yeah, interdisciplinary, the reason why he was saying was because of his intense interest should be promoted. Departments should not be, the walls should not be built around the departments. There should be constant interaction and exchange of ideas and collaborative work among the departments. That's what his intention was. But it started, and he was actually, along with me, Dr. Natarajan and T.K. Bose and some others of the people, he actually invited them from abroad.
So Professor Natarajan also joined just a year or two after you.
No, in fact, around the same time.
And Professor Bose also.
Few months.
Actually, who are your colleagues? So you mentioned Professor Krishnamurthy and Professor Ramchandran himself. But yes,
We transfer, actually, these are the people. And of course, in chemical engineering, then Professor Gopichan.
Professor T. Gopichan.
Gopichan will have been. Yeah, Professor Gopichan will have been.
Professor K. Subbaraj.
Yeah, Subbaraju. Subbaraju will have
Dr. Satyanarayana's father.
been.
He was a heat transfer person.
So there was basically a good group of people working here in various departments. But the question is that the interaction he wanted to develop, and that is the reason why he was trying his best, and he did a very good job as far as I'm concerned.
So now that we are in this topic of research, heat transfer, of course, now we have information. When we were research scholars, we saw a solar thermal power plant in BSB. This was in the mid-70s. Professor Ramchandran went to start the department of DST as secretary. I think he started the department of non-conventional energy sources. So what was his role in initiating the solar energy research
He actually,
here?
as I said, even the DST when he was secretary, with regard to this regional center for Asia and Pacific, regarding that matter, I visited Delhi and I met him in his office. He was so much interested in solar energy.
Yes.
In fact, he said casually, Shastri, do you think that like Atomic Energy Commission in this country, should we have a solar energy commission?
Right.
This was in 73,
Right.
74.
This was in 1974-75 time frame.
yes.
He was thinking, then I just casually, of course, because I had this freedom with him to talk, I just said, unfortunately, we should first of all develop a total overall plan for the energy in the entire country. For example, energy comes from solar and of course fossil fuels and hydro and all. What are our resources available in each one of these areas? And what is our projected growth rate, and what is the amount of our needs so far as energy is concerned? I said already right now we have actually at that time Ministry of Power, Ministry of Water is different,
Ministry of
coal
Coal.
is different, coal is different. So each person actually is, atomic energy of course anyway is different. So each person actually is having and each area is having its own empire, so to speak. So if you say solar energy, wind energy will become another wind energy commission. So can we avoid that? He said, no, just intellectually I was discussing there. So what I'm trying to say is,
He had
that,
absolutely.
he was looking into the future. And in that context only, we also had actually a solar
Yes, 10 kilowatt thermal power plant.
station actually developed here. Probably that is the first one.
I think so, it's the first one. Solar energy research, again, to the best of my knowledge, started in IIT Madras.
The first in the country, sir?
Yes,
Right.
definitely in the IIT system and the education institutions. And there was no, he started the non-conventional energy center, which now is MNES. Professor Ramchandran started.
Yeah, we started.
Right.
Actually, earlier there was some in the area, in the department, under the National Physical Laboratories and physics area, some work was supposedly being done in the solar. Mostly they were actually doing solar cookers, solar water heaters and that kind, but not in terms of producing
Power
energy, power.
Yeah, Professor Ramchandran was a man of vision. He initiated so many programs for the country. So we slightly shift focus because you also were the founder professor of the educational technology cell. Today this is a very big thing again, and through that cell we have the NPTEL program, which is extremely popular in the country, and now it's simply expanding. But you were the originator of that. Can you say a few words
Actually,
about
what
it?
happened was that this happened actually in 1985 or 86.
Professor Professor Indiresh.
86 and 87, because I took over as head of the department in 1986.
Yeah.
So one day in 1987 or something, one suddenly just before the financial year comes to an end, in January or so, we received suddenly a fax message. The director received a fax message saying that they have got additional funds.
Yeah, usual.
What will you do with this?
So we are now giving actually 2 crores to each of the 5 IITs to develop an educational technology cell. So it came. First meeting actually took place in Delhi, and I think Professor Raina from Electrical Engineering Department, he went. They thought nothing will come out of it. But then a few days later, suddenly another fax comes and says, send your representative with complete plan of action. So then Professor Srinath, who was the director at that time, he asked Raina, he said, I am not interested. There is nothing is going to happen, nothing. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I happened to be in director's office at that time because I was trying to go to Delhi in connection with my UNESCO center. So he said, you go. So Srinath said, you go. He said, what do I do with it? I don't know. He said, you study, these are the materials, you just do this. This is what they want. So I worked on it for 2-3 days. Tried to at least bring up some questions, what exactly is going to happen and all. So I attended the meeting. Then it appeared to be that they are in a hurry to give funds. And they did not have much idea. We also did not have much idea. So anyway, they are giving the funds. So let us create the infrastructure. And other people later on, will take it up and so that is how it started. So as soon as I came, luckily for me, because I was heading the department, there was space constraint. Nobody is willing to give any for studio and all that. So because of the mechanical sciences block, I was head of the department. Under our control, there is one 356 MSB.
Yes,
356 room number.
It was there for a long time since we shifted.
Yeah, it was actually a drawing this thing, because by the time 5-year program became 4-year program, a lot of drawing instruction was cut from the BTech program. So several of these drawing halls became actually vacant. And luckily for us, I was able to put it in the department, and the department very generously agreed. They did not contest. They said, okay, you take that one. And then we prepared that studio.
I remember a lot how much time you spent on getting the equipment from Japan, the Sony equipment. You also had the first recruits for that. Rabindranath was one of the first recruits at that time.
It had to go to the board because basically what they said is, okay, you are creating certain cameraman, producer. These are not names, not available in the IIT system.
That's right.
IIT system. So what is their career growth? Supposing you take somebody else, how is he going to grow? So I said, I don't know.
At that time.
But luckily because of the the generosity of the board as well as the director and all the people concerned, they said we will give you just 3 people, one cameraman, producer, and some other.
So were you producing video tapes of courses? Or
Yes, courses.
Yes.
Because it was pre-internet and so on.
The idea was to
Yes.
get, for example, lecturers and professors from various departments, make tapes on the subject matter. That is basically, take a subject, like a physics. In that you, for example, undergraduate program, there is a first year or second year physics. The professor actually gives some series of lectures. So you, for a semester, let us say a total about 30-40 lectures you give. So you make them into about 20 or so lectures, so that the concepts can be explained by the experts, and send them to various other engineering colleges if they want to, practically for free.
So these copies were disseminated to colleges?
Colleges, yeah.
So this was much before NPTEL came in.
That is before the NPTEL. That is the idea.
Yeah.
So that
Late
is
80s.
That is how the first, I think, the Professor V.G.K. Murthy, Professor Roshan,
Lots
and
of
a few
people.
others started.
That 50 rupees books.
No, tapes.
Tapes,
I see.
video tapes.
This was there's a studio that was there in the MSB.
Yeah.
The legacy is still there, I think.
fact-
I think there's still a studio there.
Studio there, and with also we soundproofed it. We had to bring experts to soundproof it.
Yes. Sir, now we are on this topic of center. You are also aware that the Industrial Consultancy Center, which is now the ICSR, was started, and also there is an Engineering Design Center.
Yes.
Today we have a Department of Engineering Design. So these two are ahead. I mean, they started this. Can you your experience with this?
Actually, when I was heading the department, the engineering design center, there was an engineering design center in the Department of Mechanical Engineering. And I don't know the starting time, probably it was there for a long time, because basically 1970, when I joined, it was there at that time. It was there. What that engineering design center had was people from physics background and mechanical engineering background. And the people from the physics department were also basically in the area of optics. Optics. So when 1987 or so, Professor Srinath said, what is this center doing here? So let the physicists go to the physics department and the other people go to mechanical engineering department. There was obviously, there is a
Different opinions
different
at that
opinion kind of thing in the physics department
Put it
or our
mildly.
department. But we have to put through the departmental consultative committee. We did it, and finally, with the understanding that each departmental staff strength will not be affected. These people were allowed to shift to departments.
So that is for Sirohi.
Professor R.S. Sirohi, then Dr. Channabasavaya for mechanical departments.
I know.
Channabasavaya came, Kalam.
Kalam was there.
So these people came to mechanical engineering department. So they joined the machine design group and so forth. So that is how the engineering design center used to work for some time, but their collaboration with the industry in most departments was basically very, very small at that time, because the culture still did not develop to that extent, right? Like for example today.
Absolutely. How about the ICC? Professor Wagner was the first person.
Professor Wagner was the first person. I think the second person to take over from him was Professor Narayana Murthy.
So this was when Professor Ramchandran was there, or after that? Pandale.
After Pandale.
Maybe Professor Pandale.
was there. Because Pandale took over in 1973, I think.
Yes,
November or
December 10th.
December. So he, during his tenure only, the heads of departments, the deanships were created. They were not called dean at that time, it was called professor in charge. Professor in charge of Industrial Consultancy Center. Professor in charge of academic courses like that. So then later on, of course, it formally became dean. So the senior most heads of departments actually were requested to occupy these new professor in charge positions. And Professor Narayana Murthy became the professor in charge at that time. So I think this took place around 75 or so. 75.
Professor Pandale was the director at that time. Now, as you know, it has grown into a very big center. So lots of the seeds for today's activities of IIT Madras, obviously in 70s and 80s, because of some very visionary people and their efforts. So slightly shifting focus. You were also chairman of the Vanavani committee.
Yes.
What was the situation? What were your contributions there?
Professor Indiresan actually one day called me and he said, will you take over the Vanavani school? So I said, it so happened my children also were going to Vanavani, and Vanavani actually had a very good reputation in the city at that time, was one of the best schools. because primarily because Mrs. Peter was the principal, the excellent principal. So she brought up the reputation like anything. So I thought, okay. But unfortunately, the funds availability was not very high, number one. Second thing is the employees, there was a rule in Vanavani school that 50% of the children must be from the IIT. And every child requesting admission to Vanavani from within IIT, he or she should be provided. So you cannot deny the admission. So that was the condition. So usually we used to have approximately about 1800 to 2000 children. So about 1000 or so used to be from within IIT and 1000 from outside. So what happened was there was a large demand from the Employees Association that earlier there used to be a ISC system, the Indian School Certificate, Secondary Certificate system, but they wanted to make it into a state board. So there was a big problem because the state board means they said we had alternatives, either to run it as a private school with state board this thing, or hand it over to the state government, in which case the teachers employed, all these people will be employed, control will be completely only by them, they transfer this thing. And thirdly, more importantly, the medium of instruction should be Tamil. And because of the nature of our institution, lot of people were not willing to have the Tamil medium instruction in the school. So therefore, what to do? So we have to have it. And the funds availability was not very high. So prior to taking over as chairman, I was on the board, on the management committee for 2 years. So I knew the problems. So therefore, what we tried to do is I introduced a thing which initially there was some resistance. Basically, what I said was, for providing all this infrastructure, free electricity, free water, free furniture, free buildings and everything from the IIT is a perquisite that is being given for the staff of the IIT. But why should the outsiders enjoy these things at the same tuition fees? So I said, tuition fees we cannot differentiate outsider and insider. So what I said is the establishment fees we charge the outsiders 150 rupees per year. So 1000 people were there, 1.5 lakhs was coming. So I said, okay, we now
that's a large amount of money
large
at that
amount
time.
in those days. So that we can increase the infrastructure.
When you say those days, it is the 1980s or what
It's
period was your association?
82,
with them?
84.
That was when the question of the board arose as well. The 81 was from the period when
Which one?
Board, the problem
the
is
ISC or the state board
Yeah,
question.
in fact, I changed
That was the
the
time.
system only from
Yes.
the previous one to state
Yes,
board.
yes.
State board. That is +2, so-called +2. And also at around the same time, the IIT also from a 5-year program, it changed it to 4-year program.
That's right.
So because of that, there was some surplus lab facilities. And here I must really thank actually Dr. R. Srinivasan, who was physics, he was deputy director at that time. Deputy director. He was very, very cooperative, very nice. He said, some of these experiments and all these things, now that there is a +2, let the school kids, have the advantage of these experiments. So he shifted actually some of this equipment and all that for chemistry, physics experiments. He allowed us to use so that way we were able to develop the science labs in Vanavani, in fact, which became which caused a tremendous envy to a large number of external examiners who were coming to examine our students.
Yes.
Because each student was given actually one particular lab table, experiment. 48 students were there in each section, and each person actually have under the table there is a shelf and everything, they can put their stuff there. We created that one. So the establishment charges are 150. What we tried to do was I wanted to separate the primary school, secondary school and higher secondary school in 3 units. So for that primary, we wanted to shift from the same place to another building which was there. So we wanted to have the top floor to construct that one. Luckily for me, our managing committee had Mr. Malayalam, who was the
executive engineer.
So I requested him, can we borrow some bricks and cement and sand, things like that. And then there used to be Center for Rural Development.
Yes.
So Center for Rural Development head, Dr. Radhakrishna, I asked him, they were doing some research about the fiber reinforced concrete, FRC. Fiber reinforced concrete, which is a cheap material, relatively speaking, compared to Portland cement. So they were actually, so they said, okay, why don't you use it? In that, the chicken mesh, is the reinforcement, not the steel. So using that, we constructed. I think today still it is standing. So that we constructed, made rooms, and the primary section was shifted there.
Oh, this is within Vanavani, sir?
Within Vanavani.
Right.
So basically, we borrowed the material from IIT.
Yes.
Money, so far as these establishment charges from the outsiders, with that we were able to bring the financial health of the school to a reasonably good level.
Yes.
Sir, it's interesting you mentioned the CRD because we were also there at that time. Professor Indireshan started.
Yes.
You mentioned Dr. Radhakrishnan. You were talking about the son of Professor Bhagwantam,
Yes.
who was in charge of the
Physics
CRD.
professor here.
Yes. So, can you say something about the center? The idea was
The idea was,
from Professor Indireshan at that time.
yeah, basically the reason is that the national political situation was such that people wanted to have always something connected to rural area. So Professor Indireshan wanted to have a center for rural development there. How to use, for example, whether for cooking purposes or for other house building purposes or whatever, what kind of experts in our technological institution, how they can actually help the rural people using the local substances and materials, how we can improve their living conditions. So as a part of that, they were taking several projects. In fact, energy also they were doing some, wind energy also later on came because of that. And then they were trying to have this for cheap construction. They were developing this particular fiber reinforced concrete. They were doing some experiments. And Dr. Radhakrishna said, it stands and we have already experimented, it is okay, so you can certainly use this. And
it was also known as ferrocement, I remember. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sir, we'll come to academics and research. I see that you are associated with 7 directors, starting from Professor Ramchandran up to Professor Natarajan during your stay here. And quite a few changes happened in academics and research. As you recall, in your experience, what would you say from the academics point of view, some important developments that took place?
The academic side, basically, as I was telling, the creation of the deanships. For example, the academic courses and research.
Yes.
So there is a board of academic research and board of academic courses. So therefore, there is every department actually is represented in each of these boards. And they determine what will be the kind of curriculum or the research material that you can have, research atmosphere. For example, when I became Dean of Research,
that was 1990.
90 to 93. During that period, one of the first things that I tried to do, because at that time the students were taking a long time to complete the PhD, and a reason for this long time was primarily because from the time of submitting the synopsis and PhD, by the time they get the reports and all that, that used to take a long time. So therefore, of course, because of the difficulties of equipment and funds and all that kind of thing, anyway, some delay was taking place. But more than that, even the processing of the thesis was getting delayed. So I tried to first of all collect over the previous several years what was the time that is being taken by each department in terms of because I thought after all when the person completes his PhD, he should enter the profession as early as possible. It's not fair for us to keep the student for too long.
After submitting the PhD thesis.
The PhD also. So when I did that, I found certain lacunae in the processing. So we tried to first of all improve that one, and I think fairly we were able to do this, number one. Number two is the quality of the PhD. Because a large number of PhDs coming out at that time. In fact, at that time the number of PhDs coming out was itself very small. Yeah. For example, in in the entire engineering areas, it was only 29 or 30 per year. Whereas much larger number from the science and
pure
mathematics.
science.
So the question is, what about the quality? So the quality is one way of determining the quality is out of the thesis, how many papers are being published in refereed journals. So I found that that number was not very great. So we tried to propose.
Sir, in fact, some PhD thesis passed without any publications also.
There are several.
No, it's very important because today there are very big guidelines for thesis even submission. So it started at that time.
Because basically what I proposed was, I discussed it extensively in the Board of Academic Research, and then we tried to find out, okay, when you submit the thesis, a synopsis, by that time, you should have published 2 journal papers, whether international or national doesn't matter, should publish. In the Board of Academic Research, they said it's too tough. So we said, okay, 1 journal publication and 1 conference paper. So finally the Board of Academic Research agreed. So we put it before and I went to the Professor Anglisi Swami, who was director. He said it's a good thing, we should. But when it came to the Senate, it ran into opposition, and they said no, because a large number of cases in engineering particularly, the data collection itself will take a long time. To prepare the unit itself, the experimental unit itself in the fabrication and all that, it takes a long time. So it's not possible to do this. But anyway, finally what was decided was at least 1 paper in a journal or a conference, in a refereed conference, it should be published. So that is how it started. So the quality improvement of the thesis, we tried to at least introduce, but I think nowadays, I think it is very common, a lot of nowadays. And moreover, the availability of resources also is much more now compared to at that time.
Also earlier times, if you send a paper, it would take 2 weeks to reach.
Yeah.
And they would take months for peer review, and then you have to again go back to them. It would take even a year or even more than that.
Why? For example, in our subject, the heat transfer, the International Journal of Heat Transfer used to cost $125 per year. But just imagine in those days, if you submit in the United States, for example, if you submit a paper, by the time it is reviewed and all this kind of a thing, and it comes in the print, it used to take about 9 months to 1 year.
Oh, even there, in the United States.
In those days. Now, that particular journal comes by C-mail.
Yes.
So it used to take 4 months or 5 months sometimes. And first of all, this is one journal, international journal. there are not enough funds here because as Dean of Research, I was also in charge of the library.
Oh, I see.
The library committee was
Library
trying to economize on
Economics,
the,
yeah, in
yes,
fact,
I remember that,
I
yes.
was the chairman of the committee, library committee.
Departments were asked to prioritize the journals, if I remember right.
Prioritize,
Yes,
for
that's
example,
right.
even the what is that, chemical index or something.
Yes. Engineering index.
Engineering index.
Where all the
some of
journals.
those things, they said, why don't you have this one? Well, consequently, what I'm trying to say is the funds availability was low. In addition to that, even if, for example, I submit in heat transfer, let us say there are half a dozen, I can only subscribe only to one journal, this one. This also comes after 1.5 years. In other words, the subject, if I am looking at in the journal, is actually 1.5 years old.
Yes, yes.
So these are the practical difficulties in research, and we were trying to somehow, but the idea was there that we recognize these problems and we were trying to find some solutions. And in that sense, I think there are a lot of cooperation. Occasionally there will be some difference of opinion, but generally speaking, we had very good cooperation in terms of, for example, the library. The alumni said at that time, we will construct a library. We will give you for construction. I tried to argue with the professor, the director at that time, Professor Swami. Library is not the building, it is the books inside. Now, as library committee chairman, I am cutting down what is the point in having a big building?
When there is no money to buy the
There
books.
is no money. So, is it possible, please consider whether you can have a fund that the alumni gives, out of which you can spend for the journals. But of course, it could not materialize. But what I am trying to say is that used to be the difficulties in conducting research, or these are the difficulties. So, but anyway, it has come a long way now.
So in
we are
terms of
very happy.
academics, I remember during those times the credit system was introduced. Best teachers awards were being given, and you received that, and also student feedback.
Yes.
So could you say something about this?
Actually, it was not very in an organized way, but I think Professor Pandale was the first person to think of some kind of a teacher evaluation. He was the first person. So he apparently, I don't know how he did it, but he collected a lot of information from some of the very good students in each department, at every level. And after getting that information, he identified some people from each department as best teachers. And he put up these names before the board, and the board said, yes, it's a good idea. And
So there is no committee,
so
there is no other
committee and all that.
parameters,
No.
we don't know about them.
But Pandale sent individual letters we're glad that you are deemed to be
It was called the best teacher award.
best teacher.
Excuse me, this was not known to everybody.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. So I don't
It
know.
was almost an individual thing that he
No,
did.
I came to know of it because I started reading the board minutes. Otherwise, I would not have known.
See, that is why I said it has come actually as we don't know. So in that process, for example, people like V.G.K. Murthy, and I also got one letter and all that, but I really didn't. But ultimately, formally, it was started by Professor Indiresan.
Yeah.
Professor Indiresan used to issue a weekly newsletter.
Yes.
It used to come on Friday, and in that newsletter, giving all the other news about the IIT, what is happening and all that. At the end of the semester, at the back of that newsletter, there used to be a list of the best teachers in the order of ranking, but each not ranking as such, but these are the best teachers. And he created a criteria. He asked for the feedback from the students, and some 7.5 or so out of 10, whoever gets, only they will be recognized as good teachers. So that kind of system he developed, and he ran for quite some time. I think several years it was, but it is at least open, and it is the feedback.
It was organized,
It
better
was an
organized.
organized way, in a systematic fashion it was done.
Today also we have some young teacher and scientist awards. There's endowments from, not endowments, some alumni have contributed to recognize the best teacher.
best teacher.
A couple of them.
In fact, on Teachers' Day, in fact, I was there as a Teachers'
Oh,
Day
you were-
chief guest,
you were.
in 2012. So I gave the awards to.
Yeah, well, he came as chief guest.
Oh, okay.
He gave the awards to.
Sir, how about the credit system? It was a very major
Credit system
change.
also was introduced by President Indiresan.
Okay.
President Indiresan. In fact, this so-called the timetable slot system,
Okay.
ABC slots, and the credit system was introduced by President Indiresan. Is a man of is a very constantly coming up with ideas, and it's very that way he is also very dynamic.
CRD also was his idea. CRD,
CRD
although
was
which
also
did
his
not,
Yeah.
for a long time it didn't work, but the idea was, because I remember I had just then joined, I think, Indiresan was leaving. We thought CRD was, as a resource, young faculty member, it's a good idea. IIT should be developing technology for India. And if the rural people require, I remember they were talking about developing a cart with tires or something like that, so that it's easy for the farmer to use these things. We thought, as very new faculty, that's a very nice center, but for a period of time, for several reasons, it was
But yeah, he was very conscious of the how to interact with the society and rural areas, and how to transfer this technology to the needy, particularly using the local resources and local materials.
Sir, you saw the documentary in the beginning. We talk a lot about Indo-German cooperation, and we take pride in saying ours is the only institute which still continues to have good collaborative programs with Germany. What was your experience, and either on your own or as a witness to some of these things?
In a way, this out of all this international cooperation in the establishment of IITs, the German experiment is the best. Not only because that, see, for example, in IIT Kanpur, they had only a 10-year program, and after 10 years, they stopped.
I see.
Stopped. There is nothing, no further. At individual level, there may be exchange of
Based on personal
personal
contact.
But as institutionally, there is. Whereas, as you know very well, that after the program of first 10 years, then they continued for another 3 years. But most importantly, after some time, I think it's about, see, that next 3 years is extended, and one more, I think 2 years or so they extended on the basis of joint research programs.
We had even at 1987.
Indo-German projects, Indo-German projects.
Paris division.
But the thing, in that, the basic thing is that they explicitly recognize that a professor from Germany and a professor from IIT, they are basically equal people. In other words, in that sense, that is the
I see.
very important aspect. In other words, they said, okay, now IIT Madras has developed to such a level that we can consider them as actually
Partners.
at par. So that's a very good thing. So in that sense, it was continuing. Of course, at the individual level, there is always there that cooperation, but it was formalized and continued for a long time. And that experiment only was in Germany experiment.
Indo-German cooperation.
For example, as I said earlier, in IIT Kanpur, the IIT Kanpur director at that time, Dr. Kelkar, when I was there, he was all for young faculty joining, to continue their PhD. But the American side said no. So that kind of cut and dried kind of thing was not here, because they said they understood what exactly needed and how it can be gradually transformed, taken to a higher level. And during all this time, they continue the cooperation. So in that sense, I think it's the most successful experiment, because of my association with both IIT Kharagpur and
Yes.
Kanpur.
IIT Kanpur.
In fact, one more IIT you missed. I also taught for some time at IIT Chicago.
Oh, Inna Institute. Oh, I discovered that. Then immediately after PhD you were there for...
No, when I was a faculty member at the University of Illinois Chicago,
Oh, you taught.
I was teaching evening classes at IIT.
So you had experience with IIT Kharagpur, Kanpur, ISC Bangalore, IIT Madras. And before UICC you were in some other university when Hartnett shifted.
Actually, I joined this
From-
thing only University of Delaware.
Ah, yes,
so
exactly.
my PhD formally actually is only from University of Delaware. But my PhD, because that is another, that has got nothing to do with this, because my guide, Professor Dr. Hartnett, extremely competent person, very famous person, but highly short-tempered person. And because of a difference of opinion with him as head of the department and the president of the university,
Yes.
suddenly he said, oh, you invited me to come to this place. Now if you are asked, you are inviting me to go out, I will go out.
To go out.
So he resigned and went.
And he started the energy center in Chicago.
Energy engineering department.
Any department.
That's another story, of course,
Yes,
about
yes.
the University of Illinois, this thing, but that's there were not conventional engineering departments. There were actually 4 departments in engineering college at that time. It was started in 1965. Energy engineering, information engineering, systems engineering, and materials engineering. These 4 were the departments. They were all supposed to be interdisciplinary kind of thing. So energy engineering department was there.
Yes, yes.
After some time, because like everywhere, when you have this degree from energy engineering, their employability, the graduates' employability will be a problem. So they, after a few years, they reverted back to conventional names, mechanical, civil and electrical and so forth.
Sir, so I want to have an overall picture. You started as a student in IIT Kharagpur and ended in IIT Madras. But in the last 20 years also you have kept, you are observing what's happening. So what is your overall picture of especially research in IITs at that time, how they developed and what it is today?
Obviously, there is a tremendous growth that has taken place in IIT Madras, both in terms of quantity as well as quality. So far as the quality is concerned, earlier it was generally of a lower quality mainly because of lack of resources.
Was it really a problem, sir?
Because
Because we always complain lack of funds.
As I said earlier, for example, the journal that we were talking about, it takes about 1.5 years to get here. Now, what is happening in anywhere else in the world is a matter of a few minutes. The click of a button, you can just get the information.
Information was
So information availability. So therefore, in those days, you pick up a problem primarily from what is happening elsewhere. And that too, that's a old information. And that naturally affects the quality. Whereas now, instantaneously you can get what is happening, you are on top of this thing. Plus, now I see that a large number of people are returning also from abroad. In those days when I came back from India, in fact, when I went actually after 4 or 5 years to America for 3 months to spend summer, all my friends at that time were asking me, they wanted me to say that I was a stupid going back. How could you do that kind of a thing? So in other words, that was the feeling. But so in other words, coming here was actually a very rare kind of thing. In fact, even large number of faculty here and also some of the students, final year students who were applying for universities abroad, they used to come and say, sir, why did you come?
Why did you come?
So now, but that has become actually much more, people are now, less number of people are going and more people are also returning, which is a very good...
So you must be very happy that today...
So that also increases the quality of the work that is being done now compared to that.
Today IIT Madras is number 1 in the country for the in our scheme of things.
So in that sense, it obviously, with time things will improve, but they are improving actually quite nicely at a very good rate also, because of the changes that are occurring in the technology itself.
But what are the factors you see driving the directions of research now? So now that everything is level, as it were. Earlier, you mentioned that there were restrictions because of the availability of information and
Yes,
so
yes,
forth.
yes.
So now that things are changed.
The things have changed. For example, right now the way I understand, because I don't know much about exactly individual cases, but generally speaking, there is no lack of resources. Even at that time, there was no lack of resources. For example, when Dr. Ramchandran took over as the Department of Science and Technology Secretary, his director, Dr. Guru Raja, who was also my classmate in IISc Bangalore, he came one day to, he said, Dr. Ramchandran is asking, why there was no proposal from you. I have got 7 crores with me, so why don't you take some projects? I particularly avoided writing any proposal mainly because people will simply say that he is a very close student of Dr. Ramchandran, so that's how he got the. So I was avoiding that. So what I'm trying to say is that basically the resources for IITs in those days also was not a problem. Resources, financial resources I am talking about. But in terms of other resources that are required to do research, whether in terms of for example, getting some piece of equipment done. In those days, restriction was you have to first of all go to the central workshops. You have to get it done.
Yeah.
Nowadays, for example, you can just go out and get it anytime.
Yes, sir. That's what we did as research calls. We got everything done here.
Everything done here.
So in that connection, for sake of record again, can you say something about the Gavi scheme?
The Gavi scheme,
This is an Indo-German scheme for buying equipment from Germany for Indian research
for
scholars.
Indian
IT
research.
Madras.
Yeah. I don't know much about it. But the only thing is that sometimes it led to some unnecessary complications and.
Well, I said that because as a great benefit, me and others, we got our hot wire anemometers through that. I got the hot wires themselves, lot of equipment and all those porous plates. As a single research scholar, I was greatly benefited. I didn't have to go to another place for funding. Through our lab, we applied with his signature, and it took time, but we got them. Lot of research scholars were benefited through that scheme. Later, of course, it was
Actually, as I was telling you earlier, this RDOEI project that we got, and that actually became very significant because not only being the first major sponsored research project, but in 1974 the BHEL corporate R&D was established
in Hyderabad.
In Chennai, in Hyderabad. And the first general manager was T.V. Balakrishnan. So he actually, they all came from the manufacturing side and the practical side. So when R&D was established, now he had a lot of problems. How to, first of all, start the work and how to staff the people who are competent researchers. So he found somewhere that this RDOEI project, we made something in heat transfer lab here. So he came to me and he said, what is this? Can you help us? So we actually made for the cooling purposes and all that what is called RC network analyzer, a huge thing. And he said, please, help us in this thing. So we were associated with this, and I think 3 of our PhD scholars were actually taken by him.
Yes.
And so
KVC Rao was the first one, maybe.
Yeah.
He was a faculty. He did his PhD on that.
here. So basically, that particular thing actually continued. That first project of sponsored research project that continued for several years, even afterwards, with BHEL corporate R&D in this thing. So those are at least some good experiences for us in terms of interacting with the institutions outside the education institution and.
Sir, very nice. Any other? We can go on talking to Professor Shastri for a long time, but we have covered quite a few areas.
No, I just want, we are not told that Professor Shastri always cuts jokes.
Well,
give a task.
Yeah, I've been greatly benefited by my association with him for last 47 years. I was one of his first research scholars. I just want to add to this, sir. When I came from IIT Kharagpur of MTech. So heat transfer was a new area, and we were only two PhD scholars that day for interview, Professor Srinivas Murthy and myself, and you and Professor MBK were in this MSB. I walked towards you, and Srinivas Murthy walked towards MBK, and that was it. It was over evening, we were said you are selected and all that. But when I joined, I was so excited about the work that was going on in the lab. I came from Kharagpur where we did a lot of experimental work, but the research environment was great, and I was doubly blessed that Professor Ramchandran was the chairman of the first registration committee. All the faculty, Professor Subbaraju, Professor Gopi Chand, Professor T.K. Bose, it was for me, for a new, I was hardly 21, it was a very exciting thing that I am in the midst of these, great people. And Ramchandran, in fact, he suggested an answer to me. When somebody asked a question, I was not able to answer. He said, why don't you say this, And he remembered it after several years. He said, how are you doing? Your pre-conviction PhD is over. I was a great admirer of him. I talked about him in one of the earlier, and you were associated with him and with 7 directors. You held different positions. So you have so much, of course, to share with us.
The small this thing. Dr. Ramchandran used to have a room in our laboratory, and that room was occupied by Kolar.
Yes. I said that. We would just to add to that, sir. We knew when Professor Ramchandran is visiting the lab, there is so much of activity. Professor Shastri running around, Professor Natarajan will come from there, T.K. Bose will come from there, MBK. He wouldn't stand, he would just walk all over the laboratory and talk to technical, everybody, what are you doing, It was such a great force.
You might have got the impression that Dr. Ramchandran was interested only in the heat transfer lab and department, but actually what he was doing was, 9 o'clock is the director's, normally he goes to the office. 8 o'clock he starts in his own car. You don't know which department he will go to.
I see.
He'll come to
Which department?
Unannounced. He would
Unannounced.
come.
So there is no question of any show or anything. So he comes there and talks to people. Many of them were actually faculty members working for their PhDs. So basically, lecturers and so forth. And he tries to learn from them what topic they are working on. Probably to go to that lab, he may get a chance only after several months. But then when he goes there, last time you were doing this, he remembers. His memory was phenomenal.
Absolutely.
used to be students also.
Yes.
Because I had the lucky opportunity of working with him even in the United Nations.
Yeah, we didn't cover that actually.
Yeah, in the United Nations. And the respect that he commanded, the entire staff, that was unbelievable.
UN Center for Human Settlements in Nairobi.
So basically, he's a different kind of person.
Right.
Professor Shastri, sir, thank you very much for taking your time. You are very close by, so whenever we want again, we will come and talk to you. You have shared with us lots of important things, which are significant aspects of the IIT Madras history. And that has come to us with your personal experience and your own perspective. On behalf of the Heritage Center here, thank you very much. We will try to keep in touch with you, and you have not yet visited the Heritage Center, it's the first time, so maybe we will go around. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity, and I was not really a great important player in this thing, but at the same time, whatever my experiences and personal feelings and perceptions I have tried to share with you, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you,
Thank you, Professor Shastri.